Welcome to the Future of Entrepreneurship and how to 10x the ecosystem and create exponential startups. We're really thrilled about the audience that we have today. We want to talk about how things will look like in the next 3, 5, 10 years. What impact will artificial intelligence, genomics, 3D, 4D printing, CRISPR, drones, etc. have in our lives? How can companies jump in, and how can governments make sure they're not left behind? How can NGOs leverage the present and the future? And how can entrepreneurs continue to build a better reality for us all? I'm very excited to have in the same room and the same conversation for the first time some of the forgers of the present and the future of the entrepreneurial ecosystem worldwide. I'll start with Adriana Tortajada. Adriana has been building bridges between the private initiative and the academic sector, the non-for-profits, the entrepreneurs, and the public sector for more than 20 years. She has pioneered in early stage funding, gender equality, deep tech venturing, and high impact startups. She has been a relevant activist and a stakeholder in the development of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Americas by working closely with the Startup Nation Summit, Pacific Alliance, the Mexico-US Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council, or MUSEIC, and turning Mexico basically into the entry point of the entrepreneurial global community with more than 60 countries. Adriana, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Pedro. And so to start talking about the future of entrepreneurship, we definitely must start talking about the new purpose of the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystems. So the world is more connected than ever, but it's urgent to innovate and look how with entrepreneurship we can work in a very collaborative way. It can be easy for, ecosystem scholars, actors, and entrepreneurs themselves to get lost in the glamour of developed and world-renewed, ecosystem. But there's a huge opportunity of the development, underdeveloped economies where the financial infrastructures are not abandoned. And the reality of the needs of these countries and emerging economies, and even in some non-innovative based development economies, is that the resources tend to be limited. And when economic resources and infrastructures are lacking, the most valuable tool for developing an ecosystem is collaboration. We are, playing many roles. We can talk about the new launching that we're going to face everyone about the knowledge generation, enable, articulator. Everyone that are here have played different roles in our different paths and different momentums in our careers. The future of entrepreneurship must focus and support startups that are born global and create solutions for our biggest and urgent problems and adapt to demographic changes, of course, to create a lasting social and economic impact for millions of people worldwide. And to support social welfare, we can start from understanding the entrepreneurial ecosystem for a sustainable development. So not just established business help society get through a crisis, it is a new generation of up and coming entrepreneurs who will be creating innovative, ensuring future sustainability and building safe, equitable, and strong economies that can benefit everyone. So I just want to, wrap it up. And I see two main key trends shaping this future of entrepreneurship. And one, of course, definitely by digital, agility, resilience, and speed. And of course, it's certainly becoming easier to run like a global entrepreneur. So the entire model for global entrepreneurship is evolving at high speed. So the future will be defined by digital. The World Economic Forum Futures of Jobs survey finds raising demand for skills such as active learning, stress tolerance, and flexibility. And we have already seen how companies that move quickly during the crisis had a strategic advantage over competitors because they can work, with millions on virtual and continue to provide exceptional service gained by local customers. And second key trend, it's a new age of diverse and location-independent entrepreneurship. The world is entering an exciting new age of entrepreneurship that means more women, more young people, and more entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds are launching solutions independent of location and service by remote, workers. So the new generation is successful entrepreneurs are digital nomads already. This diverse entrepreneurship is fed by an enormous talent of pool, the huge demographic bonus, all the things that are happening in Asia, and of course in Latin America and Caribbean. And of course, those ones that are so-called a demographic dividend, they know, understand how the things are evolving, and we can address a lot of the SDGs, such eradicating hunger, ensuring healthy lives, promoting education and lifelong learning, creating employment, and improving social protection and reducing inequality. Because there's a huge part of the world as well that's getting to elderly population, the expectation of life is increasing, and a lot of mobility, and of course, a huge urban people that is moving from cities. So those different trends can offer great opportunities to create exponential startups. Future entrepreneurship has the potential to be the ultimate global equalizer, creating many more opportunities for many more people.
Thank you, Adriana. Very interesting view, especially about globality and new generations. I'm pretty sure the other guests are going to have a lot to comment about that. I would like now to introduce Bob Dorf. Bob is one of the top 5 lean startup and customer development experts on the planet, co-authored the globally best-selling Startup Owner's Manual, or what some entrepreneurs call the Bible. Bob founded 7 startups, 2 home runs, 2 base hits, and 3 tax losses, more than 30 investments delivered, 7 IPOs, and 6 disasters. He also did marketing one-to-one. Bob, we're really honored to having you here. What would be your take about the future of entrepreneurship, Bob?
It's such a powerful question, but I'd like to, instead of talking about it from the global perspective, I'd like to, being a customer development guy, talk about it from the perspective of our customer. Who is our customer? It is the entrepreneur, because without them, there's no movement. And an entrepreneur, in my mind, doesn't need to be striving to build a unicorn or a massive exit or an IPO to be an entrepreneur. And in fact, many of the skills that we need to cultivate in our entrepreneurs are the skills that we can't teach. Courage, initiative, decision-making, risk tolerance, and perhaps most important of all, tenacity. And when we find those skills, those inner strengths in a person, whether it's an indigent person in the mountains and the Andes in Colombia, or at Columbia University or business school, they need those ingredients, the non-teachable ingredients first. But the second thing they need more than anything that I think is they need glue. They need a network. They need a robust ecosystem that can catch them and teach them the teachable skills and guide them to figuring out their business model, whether it's a taco truck or the next Facebook or Google, because an entrepreneur by definition is someone with the courage to go out and do something boldly on his or her own and to take the risks in exchange for the rewards. And the risks and rewards are by no means entirely monetary. When I left a very good six-figure job at the age of 22 in 1972, just a few years ago, to start my first business, I didn't know what an exit was. I didn't really know what an investor was, because nobody would be crazy enough to invest in a 22-year-old who's going to walk away from a senior job at a major radio station in New York. And I go back from time to time to the definition of an entrepreneur, which to me, the best one I've ever heard. An entrepreneur is a person brave enough to jump off a mountain and figure out how to build at least an MVP of an airplane before he or she hits the bottom of the mountain. And that's what we do. We figure stuff out, we make stuff happen, but we can't do it alone. And to me, the heart of entrepreneurial success lies in the ecosystem. And I've been very proud to have spent a ton of time back as early as 2012 finding entrepreneurs with the simplest, most basic ideas to the more exotic enterprise software ideas, and catching them at their level and plugging in the missing ingredients in their potential for success along the way. And also importantly, and I think a big part of why we're here today, giving them a roadmap, a methodology to follow, whether it's the lean startup or the new one, or any of the others in between. It's a rigor, a discipline, but not a follow this map or fall off the cliff. It's a roadmap with sort of bumper guards on both sides, giving them the room to try and to fail and to learn from the failures and so forth. And we need...
definitely, Bob. And I think you're hitting a very important topic, because especially when you have the courage but you have no support system, I think it's super relevant. I'm really happy to have Jeff here. Jeff Hoffman is an entrepreneur, a proven CEO, worldwide motivational speaker, best-selling author, Hollywood film producer of a Grammy-winning jazz album, and an executive producer of an Emmy Award-winning television show. He has been the founder of multiple startups. He has been the CEO of both public and private companies, and he is the chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network and supports the UN and similar organizations internationally. Jeff, I'd love to hear your views. Pretty sure that you've been traveling like more than 100 countries a year for the last few years. I mean, that's crazy. What's your take in what's going to happen in the next 3, 5, 10 years in terms of entrepreneurial communities?
I want to say in my probably my two prime roles now, as chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, we are on the ground building support systems and ecosystems around entrepreneurs. We're now in 190 countries. And as the founding board member of the Unreasonable Group, we are out finding the world's best entrepreneurs, solving the world's biggest problems. And today we have 289 companies in that portfolio of entrepreneurs solving problems aligned with the UN SDGs. And we've raised $6.6 billion to fund entrepreneurs around the world. We've positively impacted, we just found out, 720 million lives now. So in that process, here's the lesson I've learned. If you want to build exponential companies, if you want to solve the world's greatest problems, the scarcest resource in the world is not money. It's not financial capital, it's human capital. Everybody talks about needing funding to grow. What you need are the world's smartest people. They are far more powerful than money, and funding groups of average people does not yield results. Underfunding rock stars yields results. So if human capital is the key to making the world a better place to live, and human capital is the key to building exponential companies, that's how we were able to build several multi-billion-dollar companies that I was blessed enough to be a part of. We have to get to those people. And one good thing that came out of the pandemic is the whole planet went online way more than they were just 2 short years ago. My thought on future of entrepreneurship is it will become more about human capital. It will become, instead of spreadsheets, we'll focus on the power of the human standing in front of us, not the dollars on the bottom of their spreadsheet. We'll be looking for the next great geniuses and innovators out there, not just the next exit strategy. And we've got to get this education to I'll use the old term, the long tail of entrepreneurship. And I kind of want to rename entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship has been very tainted with a tech halo, an exit halo, a VC and a money halo, instead of the real shine it should have, which is people making the world better where they live, and frequently in a broader area around them, sometimes the whole planet. And I'll just give you a quick example of that that I think about every day. People say, Jeff, you spent your whole life scaling companies. And I tell them, yeah, now I'm trying to scale hope. I'm trying to scale access to intelligence and access to inspiration and get it everywhere. And I was in the dirt of Cambodia along the shores of the Mekong with some young Cambodians who have never heard, they don't even know what Stanford University is, to be honest. They certainly don't know what entrepreneurship is. They've never read any of the books that any of us have written. They're not part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. It reaches a relatively small percent of the population, yet they live in horrible conditions and they want to make the world better. And we had a discussion about what entrepreneurship is. It's self-determination. It's figuring out how to make things better where you are by solving a problem using a set of business skills, which are coincidentally called entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not a job, right? It's a tool set and a mindset. And I stayed up all night with them in the dirt along the side of the river. We discovered that a problem in their community, these people couldn't feed themselves, but the tourist restaurants in Cambodia, frog legs is a big dish. But all the restaurants stopped serving it. Tourists wanted it because Frogs were catching some kind of disease from the contaminated water, and diners were dying. And I sat down with these young Cambodians and said, you want to be entrepreneurs? It starts right now. And they didn't say we want to be entrepreneurs. They said we want to make things better and feed our family, which turns out is what every human being is actually trying to do. By the time we were done, these kids got a massive blue tarp, rope, a bunch of trees. We tarred the tarp to trees everywhere. We got clean water supply. We got nutrients and clean food. They created a frog farm. Bottom line, they deliver frogs on bicycles, clean frogs, fresh raised, fresh water, fresh nutrients to every restaurant that they can get to in Cambodia. And they've now been able to buy houses for everybody in their village because they solved a problem using the mindset of entrepreneurship. So I'll close by saying this. The future of entrepreneurship is access to talent, and it's incumbent upon everybody on this webinar today to figure out how we push the skill set of entrepreneurship to the people who need it most and read about it the least.
Thank you, Jeff. It was really exciting to hear the story about those entrepreneurs, and I guess Peter can share a bit more about exciting stories about entrepreneurs. You're one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, according to Fortune. From a recent note that I just got, you're creditor of a bet with Carlos Slim related to Elon Musk launching before 2025. That's hilarious, by the way. I'm the founder and executive chairman of the X Prize Foundation. He's also the executive founder of Singularity University. Peter has started over 20 companies in the areas of longevity, space, venture capital, and education. He is a New York Times best-selling author of 3 books, Abundance, Bold, and The Future is Faster Than You Think. We're so proud to having you here and learning about what you've done. I think that especially the undertaking that you're heading about spreading out the access to exponential technologies and just changing mindsets about abundance, it's phenomenal. What can you share about what might happen in the next 5-10 years?
Thank you, Pedro. Let me start with my own definition of entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is someone who finds a problem and solves it. It's basically that. And I think that we're entering a period of time where entrepreneurs are able to really scale and take on problems like never before. In fact, entrepreneurs are willing to take extraordinary risks because they're driven by passion. Salim and I call it a massive transformative purpose. And they don't know any better, or they have nothing to lose. So they'll try crazy ideas. And sometimes those crazy ideas are hard, and sometimes they're impossible, but sometimes they work. So we're entering a period of time right now where every entrepreneur has access to more resources than heads of state had just decades ago. We're seeing a massive abundance of capital, right? We hit all-time capital highs in terms of venture capital, deployable capital, crowdfunding. All of these every year in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, in a pandemic, more money was available than any time ever in human history. So there's an abundance of capital. At the same time, the tools that allow entrepreneurs to do what they do are demonetizing, right? So, a good 3D printer a decade ago would have cost you, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now it can be done for a few $1,000s or $100. Sequencing a human genome cost $100 million. Now it's approaching $100. So we're demonetizing all of the tools that entrepreneurs need or have, just like we're on a digital connection, which 20 years ago, having this digital connection would have cost a huge amount of capital. Now it's free, right? On FaceTime or on Zoom. And so it's the barrier to entry, the ability for someone to come up with a crazy idea to solve a problem and find their partners and take a shot at solving it is massive. It's never any time more available in history. And the only time better than today is going to be tomorrow. So I'm a huge believer in entrepreneurship as the means to make the world a better place, not to disrupt the planet. So my mission to all entrepreneurs is find your passion and purpose in life, and then go for it. You can find your partners. The old saying, it's find someone to go on the journey with you. And today we're living in a world where, as I think Jeff said, it doesn't, we don't have borders. If I can find the best person on the planet in the middle of India or China or Vietnam, that's amazing. I don't care where they live. I just care about, do we have an equal passion, and are we going to both commit and work as hard?
Thank you, Peter. That was inspiring. I'd like to welcome on stage Roberto Álvarez. He's the co-founder of 3 tech companies, a global connector, early stage investor, and an active entrepreneur in projects in Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. He's a venture partner at Selder Capital and an executive director of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils, a 30-plus countries global network that gathers corporations, universities, government agencies, and industry organizations. Roberto, you've also been in touch from a few conversations that we've had with a lot of policymakers. So if possible, I'd love to hear in your time also the take about not only the entrepreneur themselves, but also the system and what's around the entrepreneur.
I was trained as an engineer, and back in the 80s and early 90s, I had no clue what an entrepreneur, a startup, an investment was. And that was down in Brazil. I think there's a fundamental change that has happened, and it's a generational change in some way. And some of the folks who are here are very important in that context. Entrepreneurship is more accessible. It's codified. So entrepreneurs are those who create the future. And I think that people in policy have been realizing that. People in government have been realizing that. Maybe what they don't know is how to accelerate entrepreneurship. 3 quick comments here, Peter, that I want to add. First is that entrepreneurship is broad. There are different types of ventures. There are different types of companies. There are different types of entrepreneurs. And I think Bob was mentioning tenacity. And I have a friend in Brazil who maybe is watching this, Fernando, and we co-invested together in a tech company. And Fernando was saying to me, hey, the founders there, they're like cockroaches. They can survive the toughest situations. And probably one of the things that we have in the globe, including from a policy perspective, is that we need to address entrepreneurship full spectrum. It's about exponential companies. It's about companies that are into hard, deep tech, but also the mama and pop shops and at the corner. So supporting those guys is fundamental from a society perspective. So we have smart people all over the globe. We have entrepreneurial people all over the globe, but we are not providing them the opportunities to flourish. So addressing that is critical. This is something that your new venture with OpenExo can address. This is critical for all innovation ecosystem. Access to capital, that's fundamental. But also, let's say, access to social capital. Local innovation ecosystems are growing. We know, for instance, thanks to Jen and the work that Jeff has been steering, that we have several innovation ecosystems maturing around the globe. And in addition to that, depending on the type of venture, you mentioned Selder Capital, our investment fund based out of New York, investing in space startups. We're investing only in the United States, not in Brazil, where for instance, I come from, because those are different environments. So developing, I would say, a deep understanding on local realities, but also seeing the potential to create value through global connections is critical. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, like by entrepreneurs, by governments, so on and so forth. Very quick ideas to finish here, Peter, and maybe about the things that you're doing. I think that creating global platforms that could provide not just the knowledge, but the connections and the support, like let's say the virtual builder that you're creating, is fundamental. And probably the most transformational thing that we could do to drive entrepreneurship and exponential, let's say, ventures, is to disrupt geography.
Is something super relevant, especially when you're talking about inefficiencies of a global market. So couldn't agree more. And it's an interesting take because so far there have been many people discussing the possibility, but we haven't seen any tangible actions. And finally, we want to invite Salim Ismail to the main stage. Salim has been building disruptive digital companies as a serial entrepreneur since the early 2000s. As a prolific speaker, he gives more than 150 talks a year to audiences of all sizes around the world. He has been profiled across a vast array of media outlets, including the New York Times. Salim is a sought-after strategist and renowned technology entrepreneur who built and sold his company to Google, and the author of Exponential Organizations, a book. What do you think is going to happen with exponential organizations, exponential startups, and the next decade of the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
This is the best and most exciting time to be alive. In fact, Peter is convinced we must be living in a simulation because it's just too interesting. I think the next 10, 20, 30 years of our world is going to dictate the next few hundred, because we're in one of those massive civilization level inflections. And the only people that can really navigate us from one place to the other is entrepreneurs, because they will go and try to hack away at a problem with the tenacity that Bob mentions and never stop until they get it done. And it requires that level of grit to really solve these problems, which are pretty fundamental, because every institution by which we run the world needs to transform and so on. Now, the legacy of the last 100 and 150 years is now transitioning. It turns out in the last 50 years, 100% of net new jobs came from startups, because big companies have been getting bigger but more efficient. And 100% of job growth has come from startups. So there's a future there. And as we enter a realm where the access to technology is cheaper and cheaper, things become incredibly exciting. And I love the work that Jeff is doing, traveling all around the world, evangelizing this and showing people that this is a real path. Because in most parts of the world, the idea of being an entrepreneur, I grew up in India, and it was inconceivable at the time to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even understand the concept until I was at university in Canada, and I took a course on entrepreneurship, and somebody says, oh, you can actually build a business. And so having that awareness now go global, essentially the possibilities and potential and the track record of Silicon Valley can now be done anywhere in the world. My favorite example is look up Vega Innovations. This is the world's fastest and highest performing electric supercar, and it's being designed and built in Sri Lanka. That hotbed of automotive innovation. If you can define the world's fastest electric supercar on an island in the middle of the tropics, you can do anything anywhere. And now it's just a question of mindset and really going for that tenacity and gumption. And how big of a problem do you dare to solve? What's incredibly exciting to me is you take Elon Musk, right? His methodology is very simple. He looks at a technology that's growing exponentially, whether it's solar energy, batteries, whatever. Where will it be in 10 years? And let's build a company to intercept it in a 10-year period, neural links, whatever. And so that's a pretty easy formula if you have the gumption to ride that curve 10 years and then have the grit to follow through. We are now seeing thousands of entrepreneurs, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs all over the world completely following this model and operating with no fear. My favorite recent example is Vitalik Buterin, 18 years old, growing up in Toronto, ignores his professors. And now we have Ethereum, which as of 10 minutes ago was a $504 billion ecosystem in 6 years. Peter and I just interviewed the CEO of Thrasio, which is a startup. It's doing about a $2 billion revenue run rate in 2 years, okay? I'm just going to repeat that, $2 billion in 2 years, all done online. So this is what's possible today. You can build this. And we call this now the decade of the EXO because we've now unlocked and we have a solid track record of seeing how exponential companies can be built. The formula works very well, and anybody can pick up the formula, listen to folks like on this panel, and then go build a startup. The cost of trying becomes really low. So it's a numbers game. The more entrepreneurs we have out there, the more incredible startups we will have, the more problems we'll be able to solve. And so I get incredibly excited when I see tens of thousands of entrepreneurs having now access to the same wisdom, insight, clarity, experience, and lessons from the folks that have started all of this craze over the last few years, many of them on this panel. So it's a very exciting time. We call this the decade of the EXO because we can now build scalable companies in a way that we never could before. And the last thing that's super interesting about this new breed of companies is that we learned in the last 10, 15 years how to get customers at low cost, and we could drop the cost of demand. What exponential organizations have figured out is how do you drop the cost of supply? If you think about Airbnb, the cost of adding a room to their inventory is near zero. Whereas if you're Hyatt, you have to build a hotel. And so now we have dozens of entrepreneurs entering legacy environments with no cost of demand and low cost of supply, which means the market cap explodes. And that's why the valuations are so crazy. That's why it's so exciting to be an entrepreneur today.
Thank you so much. And I actually have more questions for you guys.